your prayers for me. Hey guys, and welcome to the fourth round of the Grand Swiss in Riga. It is getting so tough, and to be honest, I feel like my chances are getting better after every round. Someone actually told me something quite wise. It was, I don't work on my chess as much as I do during a tournament. And I love that. So the most training you get are from the games that you play. And even though it's so important to put in that preparation before an event like this, you get that much exposure and experience. It's like XP points in a video game. I mean, that obviously makes a lot of sense. So today I played against a lovely lady from Peru. Her name is Deysi Cori, and she definitely gave me a run. And to be honest, I feel like I could have played better, but then again, I quite enjoyed the game. Usually in a tournament like this, I get really tired around the 5th or 6th round, but since my games have been so grueling, I'm already feeling so exhausted. So while I'm at this tournament, I have given myself a small challenge, trying to get to 3,000 rating in tactics on chess.com. Can you guys join me? Who's going to get there first? I just crossed 2,800, so I actually challenge you guys in chat. Challenge you in the comments. This is not Twitch, it's YouTube. I challenge you to do it with me, and let me know how it goes, and let's all get to 3,000 rating in tactics. So I'm going to run you through my game today, and yes, I am currently sitting on 0 out of 4, unfortunately, but in my heart it's more. On the scoreboard it is not. Tomorrow is a new day, and to be honest, I've played 2 International Masters and 2 Grandmasters. I don't feel bad at all. Let's get going. So my opponent decided to play d4 against me, and as I've seen from her previous games, she's definitely dabbled in a number of openings, including knight f3, d4, and I think some other miscellaneous sidelines. I decided to go with d5. My usual response is not d5, but here I had some idea of what I wanted to do. c4, c6, and my plan here with c6 is, of course, I want to defend the pawn on d5 as to avoid taking on d5 with the pawn and having to recapture with the minor or major piece, running into knight to c3, or even worse, e4. So of course I want to recapture with the pawn in the center. And my opponent quickly played knight c3. In the opening, Cori did decide to play really quickly, and so I was just sitting back, taking my time and making sure that I was confident about my moves. And so far, we're all in book moves, I guess. Knight f6, knight f3, and bishop f5. And here comes the big stunner. I think Deysi decided to spend some time in this position thinking, usually I don't play this bishop f5 move, so it was out of my comfort zone, but also I was really excited to see what a position like this could bring me. I know in previous games I was having trouble with my c8 bishop, so here the trouble starts and ends. Queen to b3. And now there were, I think, a number of things I could do. I could decide to go queen to d7, but then there's knight e5 and I didn't want that. There's queen to c7, which could run into either a future bishop f4 or planning for bishop f4, or queen c8. And I just did not feel comfortable with my queen on a square like that, so here I decided to play queen to b6. I didn't check the engine, but I believe it's not the best move in the position. If it is, what would you decide to play in a position like this? Of course, I need to defend b7. I don't want to push the pawn. Of course, it's bad. So what to do here? Queen to b6, c5, and it feels a bit like a reverse London system. And I don't like to say that, but on the black pieces, it looks awfully a lot like the London system. A takes b3 and knight to a6. There were 2 things I could do here, at least what was running through my mind was knight to d7 or knight to a6. Knight a6 was more of an exciting option, just because I had ideas of playing knight to b4, which was uncontested. The reason why it's uncontested and the reason why rook a4 is not possible is because of bishop c2, targeting the pawn, rook to a3, and knight to b4. Probably it's not so dangerous for white, but probably my opponent doesn't want to go into this line. So knight a6, because I'm such a daring player, right? So there's h3 and knight to b4. So like I said, it looks a bit like the reverse London system, and the ideas in the London system I'm not too familiar with, especially with the queens off the board. We're jumping straight into a sort of endgame, but still opening mixed with middle game, mixed with endgame here, and my plan is simple. I just want to target c2. And I expected the rook a4 move, and I defended my knight with a5. Of course, it does create weaknesses on the queen side, like the square b6, and the pawn on a5 could become a danger or could get in trouble later on, and it did. It did indeed. Spoiler alert. Okay, so bishop to f4 and knight to e4. Apparently this was an inaccuracy. Maybe knight e4 was better earlier. But once again, my plans are very apparent and very simple. I just want to play knight to c2. And if the king goes to d1, I can play knight takes f2 check, winning the rook and also protecting, that is not a correct diagonal, protecting the knight on c2. Otherwise, yeah, I think that's the only square for the king. And I was looking at options like knight takes e4, pawn takes e4, and knight to h4. I would just play bishop to e6. Or knight takes knight, pawn takes knight d2. And here I had an idea. Ah, yes, of course. So my idea was to play knight to e5, targeting the bishop, having a really strong square for the knight on e5. And also, I don't have to run into any problems later on by, having my knight be under attack and also my rook be undefended. So I was really happy with this alternative. However, my opponent decided to play e3 and not capture. Another inaccuracy, I believe. And after captures, I just went for the bishop pair. Even though it meant that I would be losing a pawn after I played a4. Actually, before I played a4, I was considering a number of things. There was the probability of me playing e5 at some stage, but I wanted to start with b6. And if captures, then I have e5, targeting the bishop and the rook, and a discovered attack on the rook. But I didn't take into account that b7 was a threat too. I think after bishop takes e5, bishop takes a3, there's b7. And I'm losing the rook. Even if I castle, there's taking, and I don't know the evaluation of this position. Oh my goodness, it's a bit scary. So I decided to not be so lavish and just played the simple move a4. If I capture back with the rook, this is a huge mistake because I do run into this position where the rook goes here and it's actually very difficult for me to continue. I think rook b8, actually maybe it's not so bad. This is not a bad alternative. Perhaps I should have gone for this instead because my plan could be to simply go g6, and even if bishop h6, I can just play bishop to g7 and rook takes rook, bishop takes rook. So maybe it's not so bad, but I can still take a look with an engine later on. So let's see. Oh no, the spoilers have begun. Let's go back. Okay. Okay, so we have bishop a6. I decided to retreat my bishop to a6 and rook to b1. And already in this position, I felt like there was no real way to progress with the white pieces, and I just played rather solidly for the next few moves. As you can see, I just got my king out, my bishop out, got my rooks connected so that there's no problems there. There was always the chance that white could sacrifice an exchange for the bishop and the pawn, just because there would be a 2-pawn compensation, but it wasn't a huge issue because there's no real threat after that. So knight to d2, and I just threatened e5, ended up playing e5, and in this position I think the true evaluation is that it's rather equal. I feel really comfortable and there's nothing wrong with my position. Of course, here I cannot take with the rook because there's knight f3, targeting the pawns on g5 and my rook, well, not pawns, I guess, pawn on g5 and the rook on e5. So I have to watch out for that. So king e6, threatening exactly what I wanted, to take the pawn, and then coming back to f6, knight to f3, and rook to g8. I played quite quickly. So now my plan is to play g4, and the reason I couldn't play g4 immediately is because very difficult to see sometimes, but the rook is defending the square on the rank. And so after g3, I simply just go for the pawn, and the position just sort of locks down. And here there's really no major progress that could be made. So I ended up just shimmying my rook about, quite often not really knowing what to do, but there was nothing to do in this position. And the progress came here. I think even before this is possibly a way I could stop this, but it shouldn't be too harming to my position. And here comes my blunder. So in this particular position, I am just a pawn down. All I have to do is possibly only trade one pair of rooks, and it should be fine. Because I think in this position, maybe king c4 would be played. I can continue with a move like, possibly, let me take a look. Possibly I can even keep my rook on the 7th rank, or even just play a move like this, king e5, because if the rook ever decides to go forward, I can go and try and chase this pawn. So perhaps this is completely drawish if I take with the rook. But what I failed to realize is that I forgot Mark Dvorevsky back at the hotel, and instead did not put him on my shoulder, where he could help me in a very basic endgame, and I will show you exactly what happened. For those of you who don't know, Mark Dvorevsky is an endgame specialist and is also the author of the endgame manual. Okay, so here I took with the king, just assuming that this position is completely drawn, and after trading rooks, I missed something. I saw this move, I saw a6, but what I missed was that after king to a5, there was no way for me to avoid the whole Zugzwang situation. My assumption was that I can keep the king along these two squares, e6 and e5, just waiting for white to approach. So after a move like king e6 and king takes a6, I cannot simply play this move because now there is king b7 and I have to defend my pawn, and then there's king b6, and this position is Zugzwang, meaning whoever it is to move in this position loses. And here, unfortunately, it is my turn. If it was a game like dominoes, I would simply pass my turn on. But there's nothing I can do here. And the Zugzwang is what I ended up missing. But nonetheless, it was a hard-fought game, and we played for 4 hours. Daylight savings tomorrow does push the round an hour later for us compared to South Africa that does not have daylight savings. So if you're watching from South Africa and you want to see the game live, I believe it is happening at 2 p.m. Local time. So do check it out, but thank you so much for your support. Thank you for watching the videos, and to be honest, it's such an honor making these videos. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. What can I do to improve? But I will see you guys soon. Of course, I cannot end the video without the mittens. So while you look at this amazing sunflower, I'm going to grab my gloves and show them to you and put them on my head or something else. I don't know. Have a great evening. Bye bye.